Welcome to Planet, People, Mining, Voices at the Crossroads of Mining, Communities, and Sustainability. I'm your host, Allison Koppel. I have over 20 years in this space in 5 mining companies. I then found myself in transition when this podcast emerged through reconnecting with my incredible network, whose insights may be heard as one-off episodes on other platforms, while here they take center stage. If you're also a trailblazer with stories from the field, a mining colleague curious about what these people even do, if you're interested in this field of impactful, motivating work, or from another industry, join us as we celebrate their contributions, demystify their roles, and explore the community and sustainability issues they tackle. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, busca Planet People Mining en Español. Welcome to this episode, Pisco and Piano Concerts, Becoming Part of the Community. In this episode, I speak with civil engineer Norman Gridley, a Canadian-American who has worn multiple hats across the mining industry, particularly when he headed for South America. As general manager for an underground mine in Chile, he became part of the community fabric. Not always so for general managers. When I met him among Pisco makers in southern Peru, he was leading sustainability for Anglo American's Quellaveco project. He embodied the first principle in my community engagement trainings: see through the eyes of the community members. Understand the community perspectives. Now a consultant on risk management and environmental social governance, ESG, with the firm Satarla, he is passionate about the environment, people, and helping mining companies make better decisions. Here I am, joined with my guest, Norman Gridley. So, Norm, what are a few major life and work milestones?
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here and be here with you. There are a few things that I'd like to mention that really were fundamental in changing my life and my career. The first one really was that after I got a master's degree in Canada, my wife at the time convinced me to quit my full-time job and travel in South America for 6 months. This was way outside of my normal wheelhouse. But she convinced me.
Okay.
She convinced me. She had an aunt living in Bolivia doing missionary work. And she said, we can visit her and we can visit other countries and we can study Spanish and we can have a wonderful time. And that was the plan. And we did. We studied Spanish. We traveled. We went to 6 countries. We visited her aunt. We enjoyed the culture, the people, the geography, the food, everything. Everything was tremendous. And at the end, I actually did not want to go back to Canada. After I got back to Canada with her, I had a desire to go back and live and work in South America. So our trip was in 1980, approximately. And so we went to Argentina in 1996. We moved to Argentina. I had an opportunity to work there in Spanish as a manager of a small company. And we stayed there for a year. And at that time, we had young children. So they loved it. And they learned Spanish, actually, and they still speak Spanish quite well. And then I went back to Canada, and I lived in the U.S. for a while. But then in 2006, everything changed again. I had an opportunity to take an international job with a Canadian mining company, and they sent me to Chile, and I'm still here. So really, I came back to Chile with that company, and I'm still here 17 years later. The milestone that changed everything for me was to look outside of North America and consider the opportunities and the excitement of living and working and knowing other parts of the world.
Oh, I agree. I moved to Chile in 2006, but if I recall correctly, you and I met, I think, in 2012 or 13 in Peru at a project, South Peru American.
Yeah, we did. We met at Anglo American, and we were both working.
Yeah, I love that project in southern Peru, Quellaveco, for those who know it, right in Pisco country. That was very nice as well. I learned a lot about Pisco at the time. But how, your work You have done so many interesting things, but primarily around the environmental space and communities and its intersection more and more with mining. So, how do you describe what you're currently doing or what you're most passionate about what you're doing professionally?
Yeah, my passion is to be involved with the companies on the ground, to be in the communities, to meet the people, to understand the social and community projects that companies are helping with, to understand the challenges that communities have to accept mining in their area, and as well accept the reality that mining is not permanent, it's temporary. So, to really help to develop sustainable communities. That is my passion for sure.
So, when did you realize that this was the aspect of your work that you most liked, that this was your
Yeah,
call?
I know when I realized it. It's when, after doing engineering in North America for over 20 years, I was suddenly living in Patagonia, in the mountains, in near Coyhaique in the 11th region of Chile. And I was living, and working at an underground mine, which had been present there for over 15 years. And I did environmental work. And then for over 2 years, I was the general manager as well. And what I learned there was living there, walking in the mountains, enjoying nature, meeting people, the people who live in the area, neighbors, people who work at the mine, solving problems with them, of which we had many, and creating opportunities for them, of which we could create as a small mining company. That's when I realized that I really loved to be a part of the community and to be in a company where I had the freedom to meet people, talk freely, and offer help where I could, where we could. I don't want to say I could, where the company could, and also understand the issues that we couldn't solve. So that was a really wonderful realization for me. And then working in Quellaveco, which you know about, that we both know about, was another opportunity to expand the horizons there and to be involved in a mega project that invested very heavily in local communities for probably 5 or 6 or 7 years before initiating full construction, understanding how the company could collaborate with the stakeholders and the communities in the area. So,
I loved what you said about being part of the community and I hope not embarrassing you, but really calling to light your many talents. You really were part of the Makewa community to the point where you would give concerts. You're a
uh,
brilliant pianist. And I remember the day we had recently inaugurated the information center in the center of historic Makewa, and you held a concert and the community came and they loved it. They loved it that you were so much part of the community that you were part of its cultural thread. Do you remember the first concert or how many were there?
oh gosh, of course I do. I went into well, thanks for reminding me of that event because it was very special for me and remains very special in my mind. And I keep doing concerts, although not in the public in Peru. But I did a concert in the Moquegua within the Moquegua Information Center. That's correct. I brought my own keyboard. So I played classical and Baroque music for an audience. I think there were probably at least 100 people there. And I realized that most of these people might never have even heard this music. So I was able to talk about when it was composed, why it was composed, for what purpose, how I learned it, and how anyone can learn to play piano if they want to. It was great fun. And it was completely outside the realm of being a sustainability manager, was my role. And yeah, people liked it and I liked it. So I went on to I think I did at least 5 concerts in different communities within
Oh,
the area of influence of the project
that
over several years. It was great fun.
that's brilliant. In either in this project or maybe in some of your other work. So to me, I thought it was brilliant. You're so much part of this community fabric. You're truly understanding through their eyes what their life was like and the interaction with the company.
And in southern Chile, we were the only mining company in a huge region. So people knew us, having been there for 15 years. So people could approach me as an ordinary guy, shall we say, even though I was the GM, the general manager.
You say it so simply that you were part of the community. And in this role in Patagonia, you weren't the head of sustainability or the head of community relations. You were the general manager and felt a sense that you were part of that community that they can approach you. I will say that that's not always the case of every general manager that I've experienced, honestly. when you would explain that as your role to others or in other roles, have you ever found that it was an anomaly and not the normal practice, even though I think it should be the normal practice?
Yeah, that's an excellent way to look at it, too. This depends very much on the company itself and what it allows the managers to do, doesn't it? Because we would say, well, I was a general manager at a mine that had been there for operating for over 15 years. By the time I left, it had been operating 20 years. And I was known as the face of the company. We had other people who were also very well known, but I was approachable because the community expected to be able to approach the general manager. So, unfortunately, the company I worked for at the time allowed me to provide support to the community within limits. And there wasn't a huge bureaucracy to approve things like that. I have a few stories that have to do with that as well. One little one I'll give if we have time is that the general
What
manager before me had made commitments to the community about things that would be built.
uh,
And when I came in, the community came to me and said, "Hey, what about that community center you said you were going to build?" I said, "I was not the general manager at the time, but let's talk about how we can solve the problem." And that's what was required. It was required to carry on the maintain the goodwill of the company without making excessive commitments, but with being open and listening well, active listening. Context is different, companies are different, but I believe that having a high level person, a man or woman who represents the company, who can make statements, honest statements, listen and make commitments at times is the best thing to have in a community next to the mining company.
Yeah, what you're saying just about commitments, it's so true. At one operation where I worked, community members would come forth and say, 10 years ago or a number of years ago, the builders promised to either fix my roof or fix my fence, and I'm still waiting for that.
Exactly.
And so we did
Exactly
a
right.
massive exercise to document what was perceived, real, whatnot of a commitment. And we did that. And it was a list of over 200 commitments and checking them off and clarifying them one by one. And then from that day forward, there was a very clear procedure about commitments and how that would be handled. Because he isn't just one person in that one situation.
I agree totally.
You know, have you found internally, though, and when you're one of these larger organizations, or maybe your role now as a consultant, do you find that today in 2024 or in recent years, this role that you're going to represent the community interest within the company or you're going to engage with the community, do you find that this role is easily understood within companies now?
Within companies or within the community or both, I guess would be the
Oh, I guess
question.
both.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Within the companies now know, you're right. You're absolutely right. That over the course of years, and I've been working mining now in South America for 20 plus years, absolutely the understanding of the need to communicate, listen, and collaborate with the community is fundamental. And we know it means relates to the quote unquote social license. And but it's not quote unquote, it's a real license. It just doesn't exist on paper. But that's what's needed. And so you need community relations people, sustainability people, planners, and people with vision who can accept the recommendations of those people in the company to make that work. But many companies understand that now, of course, much more so than 20 years ago. That is true. Some of them have learned the hard way by
Yes.
being stopped or having blockages. We've seen these. We had one actually when I worked in southern Chile. We had one for a strike, and it was actually an illegal strike, and that was tricky. But I guess I agree with you in saying yes, things have changed within the companies. They recognize it. Within the communities, I think communities are beginning to see they have a role in accepting or not accepting projects, and depending on how things are run in their region or their country, they may or may not have a direct role, or they may have to intervene with an illegal role, right? A blockage. But the communities understand they have license, they have their own power to
Mhm.
take roles. They certainly do, and you know that too from your experience, I'm sure.
So, what do you think what are some of the most important issues or the most important issue that you're working on today?
Yeah, I want to say that what I'm working on day by day is doing an ESG environmental, social, and governance evaluation of mining companies at all their stages: exploration, development, design development, and operation. And I'm doing some consulting work through a group of associates headed by a very brilliant person in the UK, Sarah Gordon. And she runs a group called Satarla, and I'm an associate in that group. And one of the things we do is we provide an evaluation using a questionnaire that companies provide answers to. And using that information, plus publicly available information, we can develop a scoring of these companies. And I think it's important because it gives the company an unbiased scorecard. And it also gives the company the chance to see where they can improve their scorecard. And they can come back a year later and be scored again, come back 2 years later, be scored again. And they can publish this information. And most of these companies publish the information that's come out of the evaluation on their web pages. Why? It's because they're seeking financing. They're seeking investors. Now they're looking for support for their project. So that's the main thing I'm working on today. And I'm enjoying it greatly.
Well, that's good. You can hear it in your voice. And do you have any example? I'm going to put you on the spot, but do you have any examples? You said year after year, certain companies redo the evaluation and hopefully they see progress. Where is a case where you've seen that being transparent, disclosing this evaluation has helped the company improve performance in specific areas? What are some of these specific areas?
Yeah, that is a good question. I was going to say maybe this all depends on the company and the context. I think transparency is one of the biggest things that's involved in improving a score. Transparency of information, transparency of communication, transparency of stakeholder relations. And what else? Along with that is developing stakeholder relations models that respond to comments and concerns, and demonstrating that the company has responded to those comments and concerns. That's a really big one. And that's something literally every company can do if they choose to. And very often in the early stages, they will not. I'm not criticizing anyone in particular. I'm just saying, that if a company is just doing exploration, how can they make statements about the future? It's very hard for them to do. But they can certainly show how they interact with the community and how they receive comments and how they respond to them. That's a definite area for companies to improve in.
The first one is not as obvious when you said to demonstrate a system that they are listening to questions and concerns and responding. And especially at earlier stages, often this system is not put in place. And just to pause for a second on that, on what I found is often, I could go hours just on my thinking how important it is to have the right systems in place from day one. But often it's thought that, this social management work has to come afterwards, or that it's about some sort of donation in the community, and that's what it is. Putting in a system that shows that I listen and I respond and I write it in an Excel spreadsheet and I can be transparent about that. It does not cost much money to do that. But like you just said, it's a material, important way for companies to simply show that they are being transparent to their stakeholders. So I think that's brilliant what you called out as your number one area that you're evaluating on and seeing improvement on, and seeing that ultimately just having a system like that in place can improve the company's ability to seek investment, among other things like build trust with the stakeholders and social license and be able to move the project forward.
Absolutely right. And here's another aspect to it: is that the companies that have that in place, and if we're talking, let's say, about an exploration company, in many cases the exploration companies are trying to find enough resources to sell the company or to sell the resource, right? They're not always the company that will develop. So they may be thinking, well, we don't want to get into this whole business of, speaking and making commitments. And no, I think it's the opposite. I think they want to say, we want to document everything we hear and everything we say, so that anyone else looking at us can say, well, look at what they did to respond to these concerns and how they had improved matters on that front. I think it's stronger for the companies to have that.
And I've worked in the absence of that system and then putting in the system. And it's amazing how powerful it is just to show that I actually pick up the phone call or I answer the email and the company gives you the response. Maybe you don't like the response, but you know that you've been heard.
Right.
Um, but back to your earlier, well, a couple points earlier when we were talking about the importance at an early stage of just listening, that you said it's actually the opposite. It's what have you heard and how do you reflect that? I've had multiple discussions internally, especially at early stages, where colleagues, non community colleagues will say, well, we don't have anything to say, so we're not going to raise expectations and go out and talk to the communities. Better to wait. And my
Yeah.
advice is always you say what you know, like I'm a company, my name is this, these are my values. You say what you intend to do, but then you say what you don't know. I don't know how many jobs we'll create. I don't know if this will become a mine. And then you say how you plan to know what you don't know. And then this is my favorite question to advise. Then you just ask, how would you like to be engaged?
Right.
We go out and we assume so much that they're not going to want to hear this because we don't trust that they'll be able to understand or ask information. And better I say nothing. And we think that's the cheaper, better option. Where it's amazing how, in this day and age of how technological we are and how advanced, and how you said, a number of companies understand this work today in 2024. But a lot of it is going back to basics and just demonstrating that we've shown up, we've said what we know, we said what we didn't know, and then we asked how you want to be engaged.
Really great point. And of course, how people want to or can be engaged is going to vary so widely around any project anywhere. We could be dealing with communities that are very dispersed or very close to the operation, or both. We obviously are very often dealing with indigenous communities. We may be dealing with overlapping jurisdictions. We can be dealing with places where mining has been done elsewhere poorly or well. We also know that the availability of workers and professionals and the ability to hire and to hire locally where you can, or if you can't, you understand that, or you can develop local skill. And purchasing, those also are factors that come into play in these evaluations that I'm talking about, ESG evaluation.
Can you demonstrate that you have a system in place? No matter, I say always, no matter how simple it is, if it's transparent and consistent, I have seen a lot done with an Excel spreadsheet, I'll tell you. But I think today, there are more available tools, but I always say back to basics, whatever.
When we say back to basics, again, depending on where you are, I can tell you without naming any names, because that's part of the work we do is confidential. Say, in an African country, I looked at one company that said, we are listing all opportunities that come up in the local library on the wall. I thought, yeah, well, that's good. That's where people go. That's where people have information. It's a very positive thing that shows that they understand how to communicate to people in the community what they need at their operation.
That's exactly. And it just showed that you took the time to understand how that community works and meet them where they are.
Right.
But back to our earlier discussion, I wanted to interject, the different ways that you can engage with people and how they want to be engaged. I'm just thinking of my 14-year-old daughter. She wants to know, why don't we do more TikToks about how the mind works? Now, I've figured out how to do this podcast. I haven't fully figured out TikToks yet, but communities worldwide are changing so rapidly,
Right.
so rapidly. To meet young people where they are, it is amazing how many older people are on different media platforms and engaging with other people in the world in different ways. And so to me, that it just shows there's never an excuse to do nothing. Well, listen, Norman, you have been a tremendous mentor to me. You always take my call, no matter what phase of my career I am in, or what country I am in. Who have been your mentors, or who's been important in your professional life? If you don't want to call them out by name, I understand, but maybe specific roles of people who have influenced you.
Yeah. Well, how long do we have? I guess I've thought
a few minutes.
I've thought about many people in this regard over the past few years, in fact, realizing, how did I get here? How did I get to be living in Chile and enjoying such a wonderful place to live with a wonderful partner, a Chilean partner. Say, well, how did I get here? Well, first of all, I have to say my wife, my ex-wife, Debbie, convinced me to give up everything and go to South America. That was a life-changing experience. I told you at the beginning of the call, of the interview. I had a couple of managers in Halifax, Nova Scotia, who convinced me to push the envelope, really, and to change jobs. And these people convinced me to change jobs. And, many people are afraid to change jobs nowadays. If they change and they're not expecting it, they can be shocked. On the other hand, if you've changed as many times as I have, you're not shocked at all. And you say, well, okay, I've been through this before. I had a manager in Canada as well who taught me how to overcome an error very quickly and just jump into it and solve it, an engineering mistake. And another manager in Canada who convinced me to move to Chile and to join mining after I had a successful career going in Maine as a consulting engineer. I gave it all up and I went to Chile. And I thank him for that. And then I had a manager who was convinced enough to give me the role as acting general manager at an underground mine. And who was I? I was not an underground mining guy. I was an environmental and social person, but I got the job. And here's where I need to give credit to my partner, Alejandra, whom I live with. And she told me, Norman, you can be the general manager. You can do that. And I said, how do you know that? How can you possibly know that? I said, well, you can. And for that vote of confidence from her and my manager, I did it. And then I came to Santiago, and I was hired by a wonderful manager as well, Lorenzo. And I had an excellent project manager at the Quellaveco project, Domenico. And now I'm working for Sarah. And Sarah is an ex-Anglo person, and she and I get along great. All these people have helped me get to where I am today.
No, I was going to say, I'm sure the list is actually longer, and you were trying to prioritize it down, but
I did.
What I pick up from that, I mean, one is there is something to be said about picking your life partners or partner and person who's in your life who's going to encourage you to embrace life. I think that's very important. And then if you are in a management position or in a position to influence, to take chances on people and believe in the people on your team and in your network and push them to do new things that they are capable of doing. I think it's brilliant that your manager pushed you to be a general manager, even though that wasn't your classic background. That's very inspiring. So what advice do you have for others to succeed in this field?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I want to also follow on what you just said. It is fantastic to be able to give people opportunities. And we did this in South America, in Patagonia, and we did it in Peru. And we gave people an opportunity to do something they had never done, but they were motivated. And they did it, and they took it on. And we're ready to, that's taking a chance, because if it doesn't work, then we have to make a change, right? But that's taking a chance. So what's my advice? Some advice I was just thinking of, take some chances, okay? Be open to the opportunities, as you said, be open. And be a mentor where you can be a mentor to others, right? But above all this, I have to say, you do need to maintain a balance with your work and your life. Your work in mining can become your life. Being a general manager, for example, you're not really disconnected at any point, 24/7. It's very hard to be disconnected, but you need a balance. I was out walking in the mountains and in the woods. Even though I was the GM, I had a phone with me, Keep your health. So if you maintain a balance and you keep your health, then you can enjoy your life, and you can enjoy the work and your life, because your life is not your work. Your life is everything, and your work is a big part of it, but your life is everything else that goes along with that. So that's a really strong piece of advice I have for someone working today. And actually, I talked to my son, my older son, who now lives in Tennessee and is working at a composting and recycling center, and he's working 7 days a week. And I have to say to him every week, hey, Patrick, you got to take at least one day off a week, just one, because if you do that for 40 years, you're going to be pretty worn out. But then my younger son, who is a world traveler, has helped me to explore Nepal 3 times already. And I am addicted. One of my addictions is to trekking, and I'm trying to go to Nepal every year now. Last year I went with my partner, Alejandra. And I've been with my son, and I'm going to go hopefully this year again with my son to Nepal.
Well, it sounds like, Norman, you have figured out how to have this wonderfully full, balanced life with all of your passions, from music to trekking to making a difference, so that we can responsibly source metals and minerals around the world, team building. You have such a collection of experiences that I am honored that you joined this podcast to share a bit about this life with us. And thank you so much, Norman, for all of the support and advice that you've given me over the years.
Well, Allison, thank you for having me on. And also, I've learned from you and how flexible you've been in your changes over your career and taking chances. So I'm also impressed very much so with what you've done. And I look forward to keeping in contact. I also hope that our discussion has provided some bit of inspiration to other people who may be interested in how planet, people, and mining can affect them. So I, congratulate you for creating the podcast, and I hope it's been a helpful discussion. I've certainly enjoyed it very much.
Oh, I have too. Thank you so much. Take care, Norman.
Thank you, Allison. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. If you like what you heard, please like, provide a 5-star review, and amplify.